Hello, I am the thinker. In Latin America, over the last few decades, various political processes have promised, from their inception, the same objective: social justice, equality, and dignity for their people. In their initial discourse, they all seemed oriented toward the profound transformation of human life. They presented themselves as paths to historical redemption, as answers to old injustices, and as opportunities to inaugurate a new era. However, as time passes, promises give way to results, and it is at that moment that thought must prevail over emotion. Today, I want to invite you to a serene reflection, without confrontation, without fanaticism, and without prejudice, but with a clear criterion: to observe what has happened in three countries of our continent: Cuba, Venezuela, and Nicaragua. Not to judge from passion, but to understand from reality, because understanding is the first step toward freedom, and it is also the first step toward the historical responsibility of our peoples. Each of these processes originated in different contexts. In Cuba, an armed revolution promised to liberate the people from a system considered unjust. In Venezuela, a democratic process sought to profoundly transform the country's social and political structure. In Nicaragua, a history marked by conflicts, struggles, returns to power, and gradual transformations of the institutional system. These are different paths, with different rhythms and their own particularities, but all driven by a common idea: the need for change. And here a first reflection arises. Not every change guarantees improvement. Sometimes change appears shrouded in hope, enthusiasm, and political rhetoric. But the initial force of a process is one thing, and the result that process leaves in people's concrete lives is quite another. History demonstrates that it is not enough to simply change hands. The real question is what kind of life is ultimately built for the people after that change. When the thinker observes history, he does not dwell solely on the rhetoric. He focuses on the results, because results are the proof of reality, and results are not an abstraction. They manifest themselves in people's daily lives, in their freedom, their opportunities, their ability to envision a future, to raise a family, to work with dignity, to express an opinion without fear, and to feel that their efforts have meaning. When we observe these three cases, we find a fact that cannot be ignored. Millions of citizens have made a silent but decisive choice: to emigrate. They don't do it on a whim. They don't do it because it's fashionable. They don't do it out of mere ideological curiosity. They do it out of necessity. And that necessity speaks. It speaks with a force that sometimes surpasses any official discourse, because when a people begins to live, when a significant portion of its citizens feels they must abandon their homeland to seek something better elsewhere, they are saying something that must be listened to very carefully. People don't emigrate en masse when they find broad horizons of freedom, security, and prosperity. They emigrate when they perceive that the internal path is narrowing, that opportunities are diminishing, and that their efforts no longer find a match for hope. Therefore, mass emigration is not just an economic or social phenomenon. It is also a political and moral symptom. It is a sign that something profound in the relationship between the system and the individual has entered a crisis. And if we delve even deeper into this reality, another element emerges that cannot be ignored: the existence of people deprived of their freedom for political reasons. Beyond interpretations, beyond justifications, their mere presence raises a question that no system should avoid. Can a society be considered truly healthy when there are citizens imprisoned for thinking differently? No political model would, in principle, aspire to display this kind of reality. And yet, in some cases, this reality exists, not as an isolated exception, but as part of a system that deserves to be understood. And it is precisely there that the analysis must pause, not to condemn based on emotion, but to observe with reason. There is also an element that runs through all these processes. Even in the most closed systems, language continues to invoke democracy. We talk about participation, the people, legitimacy, and popular will. Why is this? Because deep within every human being lies an unyielding aspiration, freedom, the right to choose, to express opinions, to decide, to dissent, to truly participate in the course of public life. This aspiration does not disappear. It may be limited, it may be contained, it may be postponed, but it can never be completely extinguished. This reveals something very important. Democracy is not merely an electoral mechanism. It is also a spiritual and civic necessity for people. Human societies yearn to be heard. They yearn to participate. They yearn for the possibility of correcting course when they feel the chosen path is not yielding the expected results. And when that possibility diminishes or weakens, a silent tension begins to grow between the discourse of power and the concrete experience of the population. Here, an idea I consider central emerges. History does not advance in a straight line. It is not a continuous and uniform march toward a single destination. History moves like a pendulum. It oscillates between openness and closure, between freedom and control, between expansion and restriction, between hope and disillusionment. And with each swing, opportunities, warnings, and lessons arise. The problem is not the pendulum's movement. The problem is failing to recognize it. The problem is living within a historical shift without noticing that this shift is occurring. When people do not understand the historical moment they are in, they lose the ability to act with clarity. And when that possibility is lost, opportunities pass, and they don't return easily. History offers opportunities, but it doesn't wait forever. At certain moments, a door opens. If a people isn't ready to see it, that door closes, and the train keeps going. That's why this analysis doesn't seek to simplistically point fingers. It seeks to understand. Because history isn't learned through outcry, but through clarity. Every political system, every economic model, every form of social organization must be evaluated by its results, not by its declared intentions, not by the beauty of its slogans, not by the fervor of its original promises, but by what it actually generates in people's lives. And here it's worth remembering something that, as a thinker, I often affirm from a serene and stoic perspective, that every system should showcase its results. That is perhaps the purest way to analyze politics, to show results, to show living conditions, to show real freedoms, to show concrete opportunities, to show the degree of hope that a society can offer its citizens. Everything else, often, belongs to the realm of rhetoric. There is no vaccine against ambition or human corruption. That is a permanent reality of the human condition. No system is automatically free from this risk. No ideology is immune by definition. No political project can be considered pure solely based on its initial intentions. That is why societies need defenses, institutional defenses, civic defenses, moral defenses. They need limits on power. They need active citizenship. They need historical awareness. And they also need the maturity to understand that no model should be sustained solely by faith, but rather examined by its results. Today, Latin America finds itself once again facing an opportunity for reflection, not because a magic formula will solve all its problems, but because reality itself is raising questions that can no longer be avoided. What does each system produce? What freedoms does it preserve? What future does it offer? What kind of human being does it help to form? What real opportunities does it give its young people? What destiny does it open for its people? Perhaps the most important reflection is this: it is not enough to ask why things happened. It is also necessary to ask what we do with what we have learned. Because if the experience of peoples is not transformed into consciousness, then suffering does not teach, and history repeats itself. The pendulum of history does not stop, and in each of its swings, it opens an opportunity to understand, to decide, and to act. Not from violence, not from hatred, not from partisan blindness, but from lucidity. Because in the end, it is not the systems that build the destiny of peoples. It is the peoples, with their consciousness or their passivity, who end up building the destiny of the systems. And that is why, when we observe Cuba, Venezuela and Nicaragua, the decisive question is not only what happened there. The deeper question is, what lesson the rest of the continent wants to draw from all of this? Because history, when it speaks powerfully, does not do so for us to admire from afar. It does so for us to learn. I am the thinker. If you found this reflection valuable, I invite you to subscribe to the channel and participate with your comments. Thinking together is also a way to build the future.